What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be watching a video from Nick from Nicholas Russell Consulting. Do you remember him? We did a react to him once before. Apparently he has dropped a video about me, or at least he's reacting to one of my videos, and the video is titled No Evildea, Comprehensible Input Does Beat Flashcards. Ooh, it looks like we're about to have some internet beef. Everyone loves some pointless internet beef over pointless shit like flashcards and comprehensible input, but we're gonna do it. Anyway, so it looks like he's reacting to my video where I reacted to Steve, and Steve, I think he was talking down about flashcards. I can't remember. But I remember in my video, I was basically saying, whoa, hold up, guys. Flashcards are an excellent tool to complement your language learning journey. Of course, you need a lot of comprehensible input, but you want to use flashcards because flashcards, they basically help you prime your brain for the structures, the sounds, the words, and then also help you massively with output. So I'm kind of curious to see what he's got to say here because he's talking about comprehensible input still beating flashcards. Poor flashcards. But before we get into this video, I noticed something with your thumbnails, man. What is going on here? Now, I haven't watched these videos. I'm just gonna go based on the thumbnails, but we've got I don't believe in dreaming Spanish anymore, and I'm sorry, Pablo. And then if we scroll up, he's like, why comprehensible input doesn't work? And then at the same time, Pablo was right about everything. What's going on? I'm a bit confused. You look a little bit flaky there. You're on and off with Pablo. Poor Pablo, man. He's copping some flack. Okay, let's watch this video together. Boom, this is 16 minutes long. I might speed it up. We shall see.
So around a week or two ago, I saw Steve Kaufman's flashcard video pop up. And then about a week later, I saw Evildea's flashcard video responding to Steve's video pop up. And I did not watch either of them. But this topic interested me, so I thought I'd...
What? You did not watch either, you didn't watch either of our videos? Then how are you going to make a response? What? My brain is so blown right now. You haven't watched either of us. I don't understand. Imagine this, you got two people that having an argument down there, talking about something, and you're over here with your hands and ears going, la 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 la, but I have an opinion. It makes no sense. Okay, I'm sure that... Okay.
Pile on. I've only ever watched about 3 to 4 Evildea videos. I watched his,
Well, thank you. I managed to worm my way into your brain at least 3 times.
750-hour Dreaming Spanish review, which I thought was good. And I've obviously watched the one about me. I myself am pretty anti-flashcard, but when I quit flashcards early on a long time ago, I really never looked back. So, I thought it was possible there was some argument about flashcards that I was missing. So
okay, let me just clarify my argument in case you haven't seen that previous video. But, editor, please put it up here so those can go watch it if they want. My argument is... and I already stated this, but let me just restate it. If you don't want to use flashcards, that's perfectly fine. However, if you have the tenacity and the willingness to use flashcards, they are an excellent tool to complement you. They can help you with your listening, they can help you with your reading, they can help you with your speaking. It really depends on how you use flashcards and for what purpose you want to use them, okay? And my video was basically, the response was basically to Steve misrepresenting how to use flashcards. And I was saying, okay, maybe that is some old school way of using flashcards, but that is not how I recommend the use of flashcards or those who I see use flashcards within the language space, okay? So I was basically pointing that out, and then I gave a demo of appropriate use and context for flashcards to help you.
So I went into this video open-minded. I'm not going to go over every argument Steve made or every rebuttal Evildea made, and...
So you did watch the video. What was that, random thing at the start there where you're like, I didn't watch either video? I'm so confused. It's like, we're what, 45 seconds in and you've already gone against yourself.
Instead, I'm just going to give my own take based on what's already been said. What surprised me is after...
Cool. So I'm going to forget about all the fact that he hasn't seen my video, but he has seen the video.
After I watched Evildea's video on flashcards, I kind of ended up being more anti-flashcard as opposed to less.
Okay.
Firstly, I want to concede the idea that flashcards can help you. Nowhere in this video am I going to say that flashcards are just useless and don't do anything. Also, I want to concede that input is a bad tool for remembering numbers and dates and other trivial facts. I think that's true. That's a pretty obvious application for flashcards in my opinion. Also, of course, just like Evildea and Steve said, if you like to do flashcards, continue to do flashcards. I'm not here to tell you to stop doing flashcards if you like them. You should just do what you like.
Okay, so it seems like so far, we're probably 90% in agreement. Okay, cool.
One of Steve's major points in his video is that flashcards lack context, and I 100% agree with that.
So rather than memorizing pairs or rules, you're expanding your sense of the rhythm, the intonation, the range of meaning of words. It's a much more complex, expanding connection with the language, which the sort of isolated retrieval of a flashcard item just doesn't do that. It's much, much more limited.
Evildea's response is basically flashcards do have context when used properly.
Okay, isolated from context, no rhythm, intonation, emotion, or grammatical patterns, just a bare pair. No. No! This is not correct.
We use sentences and not isolated words. We use multiple cards per word to cover different structures and patterns. We can drill structures across many fillers. Like if you have a sentence, I'm allergic to X, you can remove the X and replace it with shrimp or turkey or eggs. And if we want other context like intonations, we can use audio.
Yeah, just so you guys know why I was doing that structure. When you swap out just the noun, it teaches your brain that there is a set structure that underlies this entire sentence, and there is a component of the set structure which is swappable. You're essentially creating a chunk that your brain knows how to easily manipulate. And then once you've learnt that chunk, you could combine that with other chunks. And the flashcards, the templates that underline the flashcards basically represent those chunks. And that card that he was showing, I believe was a, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it was a production card. So for practicing that chunk.
And I really think there's a category error happening here. I'm not sure how you can really arrive at flashcards give context using the shrimp allergy example. I think Evildea is conflating.
Well, okay. You probably picked a terrible example for your video here or your rebuttal. That is not something that needs any specific category. Like, I am allergic to something like saying I am allergic to something, it doesn't really need context. It's a set statement. You probably could have used some other flashcards that I had to make your argument, but we shall see.
Context and repetition. Think about what context actually is. Let's say you were watching this video to help you learn English, which some of you actually are. For every word you're hearing, you're getting context at an innumerable amount of layers at the same time. There's the context of my current sentence, obviously. There's the context of the paragraph surrounding my sentence. There's the context of the broader video itself, the video topic. There's the context of me being the speaker. And all of this matters because you know, for instance, I'm speaking American English. You know the level of formality at which I'm speaking. You know I'm a male in his mid-20s, not a woman in her 80s. If you've watched my channel before, you have the context of every single video that you've watched up to this point. You can see my emotional state, for instance. Am I sad? Am I angry? Of course, this is an explainer video, so I'm not super emotional, but you get the idea.
Okay, so I get the context. It's basically the entire history that's related to the words that you're saying at this moment. Okay?
You have so many layers of context, I literally couldn't name them all, and that's why Steve is saying input is context rich. You know all of these things without anybody explicitly telling you them, and all of these things are affecting what words I use and how I'm phrasing my sentences.
Okay, I do want to talk a little bit about context because I can see the direction that this argument is already going. The direction is that by just doing it via input as opposed to using flashcards, you are constantly getting a refreshed matrix of basically ideas, experiences, all this stuff related to the words they're constantly being reused and constantly showing new ways and new patterns that these structures are being used in. Okay. However, there is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the brain works with this because people always talk about this. They're like more input, more input, more input because you're basically building this rich map in your head, but you're not. What happens with a mass amount of input is that your brain is going to focus in on just a specific little bit here and there. And everything else is going to black out and completely forget about. Just instantly forget about, okay? And evidence of that is the fact that you could go, there's videos on YouTube, okay, where they're like, hey, I want you to watch this person right in the middle of the room. Watch what they're doing with their hands. And you'll focus on their hands and they'll be like, did you see that? Watch them again with their hands. And you'll watch and they'll like, okay, now I don't want you to watch this person's hands. Just watch what happens in the background. You're like, what do you mean in the background? And there's a guy in a monkey suit going, boop, 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 boop. You never saw the monkey suit dude before. Do you know why? Because your brain picked something to focus in on. So yes, there was a ton of context in that video. There was a person in the monkey suit in the background, someone doing something with their hands or not doing something with their hands, the people in the room, their emotions, their feelings, the time of day, everything was there. But your brain did not pay attention to any of that. It took in this video and filtered out everything except for the one little thing it cared about at that moment. So yes, doing just complete input will give you a lot of context, but the vast majority of it will be filtered out and completely forgotten. I've learnt that more and more via my experiences with my Dreaming Spanish series, that realistically, you can only gather so much from input at a time. You just gather a little bit here and there. And realistically, with my Dreaming Spanish series, the thing that's actually gotten me to that like level of what am I right now? Probably a B1 plus like understanding of the language. It's just the amount of hours. Like, I've just done an insane amount of hours at this point, like over 920 something hours. But during that 920 something hours, I guarantee you, like 90% of what I watched probably went in one ear and out the other. Like, my brain did not focus on it.
And all these layers are happening at the same time. Every word I'm saying in this video is landing inside all of them simultaneously.
And like, we're 3 minutes, 36 seconds in. What can I remember from this video? Okay, if I close my eyes now, what do I remember? You presented the fact that so my brain focused in on the fact that you said you haven't watched my video and Steve's video, and that caused me some confusion. And then after that, you said there was a category error, and that's it. Like, I think you're wearing a black suit. I don't know what the background color is. I don't know anything else. Now, so the background's a white wall. I should have known that. And I said a black suit, but you're not wearing a black suit. You're wearing a black shirt. Now, the reason I just did that little exercise right there is because your brain is excellent at filtering out the vast majority of stuff it cannot utilize at that exact moment. And that is the problem with just doing just input without any type of focus study.
That's what context actually is, not just the words around some target word or some words in a sentence around the target word. It's all of this. Every encounter with a word and input is sitting inside a nested stack of context.
Yes and no. It sits inside a stack of context. However, the vast majority of it you will never access, utilize, or acquire in any way.
And this applies whether you're watching videos online, listening to an audiobook, or just talking to a native speaker. It applies to any form of input. When you drill, I'm allergic to X 30 times, none of that exists. There's no speaker, there's no situation, there's no topic content.
And I think you misunderstood, or maybe I did not present this efficiently or well within my video. That seems like a very random thing to have in a flashcard, right? Let me explain. You were looking at the production deck. The production deck is the deck in which I need to practice certain structures to be able to say them. If I think back to Spanish, how many times have I seen someone say I'm allergic to something? I think I might have seen one video once, some ages ago. I don't remember the word for like allergic in Spanish. How many times have I seen it in Chinese? Probably a few more times, but realistically, there has been many, many instances where I've had to say this structure myself because I am allergic to seafood, okay? So because I have to say this structure a lot, I'm not going to just naturally pick this up from context. I need to be able to practice this structure. And in order to practice it, I need to know how it's formed. And when I add it into my Anki, I don't want to just learn how to say, I'm allergic to seafood. I want to learn the underlying structure because that structure can actually be reutilized in other ways. So the structure comes from an actual place of need, of real world use. And then I expand it in order for me to learn the underlying structure that happens there. That way, when I'm in China, I can just say to someone, 我对海鲜过敏. I am allergic to seafood. It's not just a random structure that I slapped in there for no reason at all. I put it in there so that I can learn to utilize that in conversation as a chunk, as part of a greater part of my language, okay? And I think a lot of people misunderstand when I talk about flashcards. You're not meant to learn the whole language through flashcards. You're meant to learn specific templates that can be reutilized in various different places, and then the input cements the connections between this. So all the comprehensible input, it cements the connections between all of these chunks and allows and opens up more connections that you were unaware of. It's there to prime your brain. I'll give you another example, okay? So ages ago, I don't have this in my Anki deck anymore, but I put this in there when I was practicing Chinese and I was making videos in Chinese. And I realized I don't know how to say in this video or in I knew how to say it if I stopped, thought about it, and logically put the grammar together. I realized then, okay, but I could not just naturally produce this in the moment as needed. So in my production deck, which is my practice deck, I added that structure in, but not just that structure. I swapped out the bit where it says in this video with in a previous video, and in the next video, in my previous Chinese video, in this Chinese video, in my next Chinese video, the most likely things that I'm going to say to help teach my brain that there is a structure that happens here and that there is swappable components to this structure. And now, if I need to, I can say, 我在这个视频里讨论这个话题. So I am in this video discussing this topic, okay? That just naturally flowed off my tongue. There's plenty of the language in Chinese which I cannot say easily at this stage because I have not practiced the underlying structures. But that structure that I just utilized, I just said, in this video we're discussing this topic. That's not something I've actually said. Those are two separate chunks. I've never individually practiced that as one thing in Anki. I practice two separate chunks, discussing a topic or discussing X, and in this video about X, okay? Now, because I practice those structures and I've utilized them, I can now just easily shove them together, So I can do the same thing about the Steve Kaufman one, I can say, 在我上一个关于 Steve Kaufman 的视频里, so in my previous video about Steve Kaufman, okay? So there again, there's a structure that I practiced previously via Anki, and it's one that I would use quite a bit as a YouTuber. That's the point of Anki, that's the point of these kind of flashcards, is to help you with that. Now, I also presented other types of flashcards, so the audio ones, and the audio ones have a completely different purpose to the production ones. Their purpose is to help your brain actually hear really information-dense structures, because there are certain structures in every language which are highly information dense, as you pointed out, numbers being one of them.
Continuity. There's no overarching frame. It's the same structure with different fillers repeated 30 times. That's not stacking layers of context. A better word for that, again, is repetition. There's really no overarching context.
You can call it repetition, you can call it context, but essentially at the end of the day, the purpose here is to get these structures into your brain and able to utilize them. So if this is going to come down to a video about debating semantics, context versus not what is context and what isn't context, well, it has context. You just didn't see the context. The context for me having that flashcard was I've needed to utilize that structure in my real world. Now, to make your argument, there probably would have been better examples you could have taken from my Anki deck, which to the average viewer would have made no sense, but they all have context. It's just I don't need to add that context in because I know where it came from. I created the cards.
Continuity between the two sentences, I'm allergic to shrimp and I'm allergic to eggs. If you were at a restaurant and you heard those two things in succession, there would be overarching continuity. But just having those two sentences beside...
Yeah, but here's the risk, okay? So that is a very, very vital, important structure for my life. It's something that I need to be able to hear, and it's something I need to be able to produce. I can't wait for enough real-life lived experiences to learn that structure the hard way, okay? I don't want to be making that mistake.
Each other, there's no overarching continuity. It seems like Evildea thinks Steve's argument hinges on this idea that flashcards are one word per card, but that's just not true.
Well, the reason I thought that is because he actually gave demo of Link Q, or I think that's how it's pronounced. I keep getting it wrong. And it literally is that. Like, you see the word and then you just see one word. So that's why I base my argument on that. If Steve actually is not of that belief, then I take it back, okay? If his belief is that you should be using entire structures and stuff, then I'm, okay, cool. I follow. I vibe with that.
Steve's structural argument does not depend on flashcards being one word per card. It depends on flashcards being discrete and context isolated, which is true of any flashcard system, no matter how sophisticated. The underlying theory behind Steve's argument, as he explicitly states, is that language is understood as a network of experiences in your head, as opposed to discrete phrases and words.
Okay. I can agree with that. Yes, language is a very, very large network of experiencing words, the connections between them. However, I don't know if we're debating this topic or not. Realistically, it does not matter, because the point of a flashcard is to prime your brain for certain types of structures, words, and experiences, so that you don't have to wait for them to slowly, over time, enter your brain, and to allow you, once you've primed it, to then hear it more easily. It's basically just greasing the wheels.
And I want to break into that more because, in my opinion, I think this is the crux of the category error that Evildea is making. To explain that further, I have to expand Steve's metaphor, so I'm going to talk about what Steve actually means when he talks about networks in the brain. To me...
Okay, so you're going to talk on behalf of Steve. Be careful doing that for other YouTubers.
The best way to visually demonstrate this is to get deeper into the math metaphor, because when we're talking about networks, at the end of the day, we're talking about graph theory. Flashcards treat words, phrases, and sentences like they're discrete nodes in a language.
Okay, so we've got flashcard model, discrete over here, and then graph theory. Actually, this is wrong, but I'll let him play it out.
That, once collected, allow you to speak that language and understand that language fluently.
Okay, let's go back. I'm going to look at your graph and I'm going to show you that this is actually wrong. Okay, so you basically stating that flashcards here are just like these individual units, okay? And they will always just be these individual units. Now, as a data point, that can be true, but it can also be false. I have a video where I actually show flashcards being generated on the fly. So ones that I didn't generate, they are literally being generated by large groupings of nouns, adjectives, structures, whatnot, okay? So technically this is not true, but let's go based on the Anki example, okay? So the Anki example, this is not how a flashcard would work, okay? It actually does work like what you've got over here, because what I do is I create a flashcard that represents, say, this word, this word, this word, and the structures that go between. This is what I mean by structures, the connections that connect these words. And what you're learning is just to pop these parts in and out, okay? So essentially, you're learning via the flashcards and the practicing of the flashcards, this type of connection structure that goes between the words, okay? So the weighting almost. And now obviously there is certain words, let's say at the beginning here, that will always be there no matter what you pop out in the center. Okay, because that's just a part of the language. Like it just does not work if you don't have that word there. So what we're practicing is a structure and the words that make up that structure, and then teaching our brain what parts are basically poppable. And I talk about poppable, I'm talking from a computer perspective or a programming perspective right now, because I am a programmer and we're starting to step into my territory.
Fluently. Whereas comprehensible input isn't about individual nodes. It's much more about the edges or the web of connections between the nodes. When you learn a word or sentence,
yeah, so this is where your misunderstanding is. Okay, you're looking at this from a math perspective, I'm looking at this from a programming perspective. It's the same thing. So for a programming perspective, a node, okay, if we were to look at this as a programmer, how a node works is the node contains the information, then it contains the connections that go to the other nodes, and it contains the weighting of that connection. Okay, so here we can make a debate. Is the flashcard the node with the individual word, or is the flashcard now a grouping of nodes representing the various connections between those nodes, a set grouping? It's almost like if we were doing a pathfinding algorithm between 2 points. So a flashcard could be representing a pathfinding, the outcome of a pathfinding algorithm between multiple different nodes and the most likely connection that they would take. Basically, you're training your brain that this is a set path that you should take, and yet there are certain parts that can swap out. So I feel like we're going down into a semantics debate right now, and flashcards are not a node. They can be, and that's what I was saying. Don't let them be a node. Don't let them be an individual word, but they can also be representative of a set of connections.
From a flashcard is completely self-contained. It's a discrete node on a graph. Even if you do full sentences to reinforce one structure or something similar, you're still only creating connections or edges between the words or nodes in that one sentence.
That is true in that instance, but that is easy to get around if you really want. You could just create a program that automatically generates and swaps out literally anything in there. But again, flashcards, the point of them is not to try and replicate the entire language. Like, I don't know why we're heading down that path. I clearly say in my video, which was a response to Steve, that the purpose of a flashcard is to help you with set structures and to prime your brain for hearing set structures.
You encounter a word or sentence in input, it's never self-contained. Every encounter quietly connects each word to each other word, even just tangentially related to that input automatically.
Yes, that is true. However, again, there is going to be certain connections between those words which are undisputably part of an overriding structure, okay? Again, to give an example with Mandarin Chinese, okay? So in Mandarin Chinese, early on, you will learn in any textbook that if you want to use the although structure, yes, there's multiple ways to say it, but you would start with a set word, which represents although, and then you'd slap a set word, which then becomes like basically the after part. So you got although A, but B, okay? Now, they teach you that there's a set structure here, okay? Now, although it's not just going to randomly appear between two completely unrelated things, it's not going to be why, although massive, although input beats, although flashcards, like it doesn't, the structure will never appear. Okay, unless someone makes an error in speaking the language. But the chances of it appearing within a certain structure and that structure being representative of how it's used, like the vast majority of the time, that's a great instance for flashcards.
Because there's continuity. You're not just building nodes, you're growing a web of connections between nodes that you did not deliberately construct.
So here is a good example of how this is basically a semantics argument, or an argument in how far down you're going to dig into this unfolding tree, okay? Because right now you put all your videos right here in the middle. Now, are your videos, are they representative of nodes with connections between each of the videos? Or are we going to break down each video into its individual parts, which then those individual parts become nodes, so the chapters of that video? Or are we going to break it down into the individual ideas of that? So just becomes a recursive tree. At what point do you stop calling something a node? I don't even know why we're having this debate, but as a programmer, I can't help but not say, wait a second, you're just categorizing these things at a different level to me.
In this model, we can still treat words like nodes, but the nodes themselves are not where the information primarily lives. The
information exists in both places, so that is actually incorrect. You have both the information in the node and then the information associated within the edges. Without the node, the edges are meaningless. Without the edges, the node is unable to connect with anything else.
Information lives in the innumerable edges connecting each node to every other node. That's basically the model for how Steve is suggesting language is stored.
Yeah, and I don't even know why we're debating this. Like, the reason I say I don't know why we're debating this is because who cares how it works under the scenes as long as the outcome is what you want to achieve? I've shown, by using set structures, I am able to reproduce set parts of the language without having to think about them. And I've done this to the point where I got really, really good at Esperanto, and I basically never make mistakes. I will make mistakes every now and then, okay, when I'm speaking the language. But I practice those set structures so much to the point that for me, they are 100% completely automated. And of course, I've done a shite ton of input. Like, that just makes sense, okay? The input just reinforces all of those connections. Now, the way I see it, and I've said, is that the flashcards complement the input, okay? Or you could say the input complements, it doesn't matter, but I see it as the flashcards complement the input. You should be doing what? I say should, if you want to do it or not, but, do like freaking 15, 30 minutes of flashcards a day, and then the rest of the time do your input or your grammar study, whatever.
In the brain. And he's contrasting that with the much more discrete network model that flashcards implicate. This graph of discrete nodes that flashcards implicates is a reduction of the file cabinet model. So yes, therefore, I do think flashcards rely on this file cabinet model.
You can even do the whole pattern recognition thing. I often do. Like, I don't create just one flashcard. This is just a categorization problem. At the moment, you can go up or down as deep as you want in this tree and say this is the file cabinet level, realistically. Like, you could go right down to the individual word layer, or you could go all the way up the top until like an entire paragraph and still say that's still a file cabinet. Okay. Like, I'm just looking at it from a programmer's perspective, and from a programmer's perspective, we don't name these levels. Like, every level is just another level per word. Again, you don't have to just do one. You could do as many as you could have fucking 60 flashcards for one verb in all its different possible contexts if you want.
6 folders is still 6 folders. 60 folders is still 60 folders. The information still lives in discrete folders, and your brain is being trained to retrieve them like they're discrete entries. What Steve and I are...
That's actually a good thing. That is a good thing if you train your brain to do that. It allows you to easily output entire thoughts without having to stop and go through each one of those thoughts. If you combine like 2 separate chunks, okay, in Chinese, 在这个视频里, so that one chunk is in this video. That chunk could be in the previous video, in the next video, in this Chinese video, and whatever video, okay? So that's one chunk. A second chunk is 我们讨论这个话题. We are discussing this topic. Now, we could be discussing this topic, we could be discussing that topic, we could be discussing the movie, we could be discussing anything. We've got 2 separate chunks here, okay? Now, I could work with the idea that instead of using chunks, I just try to recall each piece, okay? So in this video, so in comes at the end in Chinese, so that's a li, and then the location actually goes first in Chinese, so that's zai. Like, I could do it that way, or I could just practice that entire chunk. Now, whether you want to call that a folder model or whatnot, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. What matters is it actually usable? Like, is it useful? And it is. It is extremely useful.
Saying is, for effective acquisition, we don't need to add more nodes, we need to add more edges. And not just more edges, but like innumerably more edges. And that's why I call it a category error, because at the end...
Yeah, here's the thing though. So you can add as many edges as you want, but if you don't practice walking those edges, which is the production deck you showed, those edges will remain weak. You need to walk them. And to walk them, you need to practice them. And to practice them, that's where spaced repetition comes in. It's very handy for practicing the most likely edges you are to walk. It's a pathfinding algorithm. The first time you perform a pathfinding algorithm without caching the path that you followed, you're going to go in every single direction, but you'll eventually get there. It's going to be slow, it's going to be painful. The second time you perform it, because you've cached the first time, you know the path you need to go, because you've walked it before. That's the point. Now, whether that removes context or whatnot doesn't really matter, because as you showed, those flashcards do have context. They're based on my life and how I've needed them.
At the end of the day, these two graphs are still fundamentally different graphs.
These two graphs are fundamentally different graphs. Programmatically, no.
Even if we want to grant that co-location by sentence structure creates some continuity, or in graph terms, creates more edges, we're still only adding finite edges that we consciously construct. We're not talking about the innumerable automatic edges that are inherent.
And neither was I. In my video, I was saying we want to practice those structures that you actually utilize and need, and then we use input to reinforce those structures, plus add more, okay, I'm going to use your terminology, reinforce those edges and then add more edges between them, okay? It's basically, we can wait for all the input to slowly put those edges in, or we can focus in on the edges that we know we're going to need.
To comprehensible input. And I don't want to go over all the implications of this in this video. I don't want to give all the reasons this matters, but I do want to give one of the most practical reasons it does, and that's anticipation. Your brain isn't scanning for words and structures when you're listening to a language. Instead, it's constantly predicting what comes next.
Exactly. That actually works great with what I was talking about. If you have the most likely structures you are to use, or the most likely nodes with their adjacent connections between them, then you've walked this path before. Your brain is able to predict better.
And that prediction doesn't just draw on other words in the sentence you're listening to. It's drawn instead from every other contextual edge. Who's speaking? Where are they? What topic are they talking about?
Yeah, I agree with all of this, but you're just negating the fact that they allow you to build up those connections.
What have they said in the last 5 minutes? What tone are they using? All of those are firing at the same time, helping your brain anticipate what comes next. That's the network doing its job. A flashcard cannot generate that kind of prediction because it doesn't have all of those supporting...
Okay, it's not going to generate that prediction for the entire language, and you should never be trying to put the entire language in flashcards. That would just be fucking insane. However, there are certain structures we all use day in, day out. If you listen to yourself, you have a certain way of speaking. Everyone does, okay? If you figure out the certain way that you like to speak, you can figure out how to say those structures that you are most likely to reuse over and over again. And that's where the benefit comes. You can then generate cards or a program. You could write a program, because I've done that before, that helps you practice those, helps you walk that path before you need to walk that path.
And contextual edges to draw from. This is something Steve never explicitly says in his video because it's technical, but it undergirds his entire understanding of how languages work. Language learning fundamentally isn't about words or structures. It's about invisible connections your brain has made between ideas in the target language.
Okay, structures, it's not about words and structures, it's about the invisible connections. The structures are the nodes and the connections you spoke about. I think that's just a misunderstanding of terminology.
To help you understand patterns. In my opinion, the best argument for flashcards is not to try to argue they give you context. Instead, the best argument...
But this is why I say don't download flashcards. Because you should create them yourself, because they should be based on your actual real life needs. Because then the context is, you created them. Based on some situation that you needed. The one that you gave a demo of is an absolutely banger of a situation. I need to talk about this quite regularly, okay? Now, I can't just wait for input to give me that structure. And funnily enough, there was a time where I did just allow input to give me that structure, and I got it wrong. I kept saying it wrong. okay? So it's like one of those things where, yeah, I can just wait for the input. I can vaguely understand it. I can utilize it. People understand me because they understand the context. Or I could just practice it the way it's meant to be said. And then, boom, I got it. And it's not like one of those things where it's like highly emotional or anything like that, or it's based on gender or stuff. Like, you could have pulled other ones from my deck, which would have made this argument a lot better. But all of the ones that you see in the deck have actually come from some real life contextual use that I found myself like in, basically.
Is to say they efficiently borrow context from input. But I'm not the one arguing for flashcards. Something Steve didn't touch on in his video, but is a big reason that I'm anti-flashcard, is what I call dead information. Your brain is always filtering information from your environment to decide what it should keep and what it should throw out. The stuff that matters to you in real life sticks effortlessly. The stuff you drill with no real world weight behind it gets marked for deletion the second you stop drilling it.
Yeah, and that's what I don't do. I don't drill stuff I'm never going to use. I drill stuff that I'm going to use.
And spaced repetition is definitionally a hack on this filter. Your brain is telling you, I don't want this doesn't matter to me, I don't want to keep this. And the algorithm is forced.
There's certain things, for example, the allergy one, which you pointed out, which your brain may not want it because it's not useful in 99.9% of the occasions. But then there's going to come that one time where, bro, you need that structure. Okay, you might come back and say, well, if you're saying it regularly enough, then you're just going to know how to say it. As I said, I was saying it regularly enough and I was producing the structure, but I was producing it wrong. Okay, to give you an example, what I was saying in the past is 我不能吃海鲜, which is I can't eat seafood. And I thought that would work similar to English. When you tell someone you can't eat seafood, you can't eat. But it doesn't really work that way in Chinese. They'd be a bit confused. They're like, what, you physically, like, you can't put it in your mouth or something? So, like, you have to use the allergy structure, which is then different to English. And then when I started using that one, I screwed it up as well. I was saying, 我对海鲜有过敏. I think that's actually wrong. Okay? When I looked into it, how to actually say it, it's 我对海鲜过敏. You don't need the yo, but for some reason, for whatever reason, due to the fact that, I don't know, yo is used a lot in Chinese, I felt like there was a need for me to slap it in there when there wasn't. Now, in all of those instances, I could get my thoughts across, but why would I keep practicing incorrect structures over and over and over and over without just fixing that and doing some repetitions in a flashcard program for something that I know the context completely around?
Feeding it back to you on a schedule precisely calibrated to override that decision. The fact that you have to argue with your brain to convince it to keep a word is a signal in itself that word is not worth keeping, or at least not yet.
Man, if I did everything that my brain wanted me to do, I'd do nothing. Okay, we are constantly fighting against our own brains. Literally, to get out of the bed in the morning, I was fighting against my brain. If I just let my brain naturally do what it wanted to do, it'd be like, bro, you just want to sleep. And I'll be like, okay, we're sleeping. And the next thing you know, I'm getting fired. Like, we are in a constant state of fighting against our brain.
You're trying to convince your brain to remember words or structures that you're not giving it a compelling reason to retain. This matters more than people realize when you zoom out to the actual time scale of language learning. You're gonna forget and re-remember words constantly. That's just how acquisition works. The rate of natural forgetting is way too high to manually fight it off with flashcards.
If you look at my flashcards, you'll notice it's not about drilling words. It's about drilling structures. And yes, we become very forgetful of individual words. That is true. However, structures are something that are reused so much over and over and over. The whole point I was showing with my program is you want to, because like that one structure, you know, for example, the film structure, 我在这个视频里, so basically translates in this video. But that structure can be reused for pretty much in anything. 在这个房间里, in this room. Okay. Now you might be thinking, well, why don't you just use, you know, just translate it like directly from English? Well, it actually works differently. The Chinese 在 it means that there's a position, okay? And then 这个 means this, but the ge part actually swaps out based on the type of noun. It's like it's a noun classifier, okay, based on number and stuff. And then you got li, which comes at the end, in. So in English we say in this video, but in Chinese we literally say position this video in, okay? So if you practice that structure with a flashcard, then when it comes time to use that structure, and this is a very common structure, you're able to just easily pop it out. Straight like that, okay? Now, naturally, this could lead to instances where you use that structure because, well, you think you could use that structure like that in English, but you can't. And then you just work with those scenarios as you approach them. There's no perfect system. The whole point here is just to prime your brain, teach it the underlying patterns, and allow it then via all this input that we're doing to pick up the variations to that.
The only sustainable solution, in my opinion, is to take in so much input that the words you need keep appearing on their own in real context where they actually matter to your brain. Because your brain will definitely remember words if you give them real context and real situations in which they matter. In my opinion, flashcards make way more sense when you're cramming for a test because you don't care if that knowledge or that information expires after you pass the test. But for language learning, when you want the information to stay alive for your entire life, you need a different mechanism. And in my opinion, the best mechanism, the really only mechanism, is compelling input. Compelling input tells your brain to keep this automatically.
There's an assumption here that we've got compelling input. Lots of languages don't have compelling input in the early stages or at any stage. Maybe that's because I've lived a different experience to yourself. Spanish being, one of the most spoken languages in the world, there's plenty of compelling input. But even for Mandarin Chinese in the early stages, there is no compelling input. Like, there literally isn't. There's no, like, to give you a great example for Spanish, there's multiple YouTube channels which provide compelling input for people interested in gaming with thousands of hours of content, okay? For beginners, then intermediate, then advanced, then native level. It all exists. But in Chinese, guess what? There's not one channel beyond this, like, one channel, it's got 5 videos. There's not one channel that has compelling input for people interested in gaming in the early stages, the intermediate stages, the upper. It just doesn't exist at all at any stage. It only comes at native level. So again, for a Spanish, this makes sense. And this is where you need to tailor your program to whatever situation you're in. For Esperanto, when I started, there was literally no compelling videos. Like, I made the compelling videos for other people. Now, I know that's an edge case, but there's lots of people out there learning languages such as Mandarin Chinese, which they're just not going to find compelling input in. Yeah, it fucking sucks.
So information stores itself instead of needing an algorithm to keep it propped up. I think people who do flashcards seriously underestimate the power of emotional connections with the language. There are words that I've heard literally just one time that I will never forget because of how emotionally impactful those words were.
I agree with this, and I've actually spoken about this in previous videos where, for example, traumatic events are great. Don't go out and traumatize yourself, but they're an example of you have one experience and it sticks forever. But you have very little control over that. That's the problem.
When I heard them. When you look at spaced repetition compared to that, it just feels so sterile to me. It takes language learning, which is super experience-based.
Well, obviously that's a subjective experience. And if that's your experience, then fine, don't use flashcards.
And it boils it down to what feels like test taking. Before we move to the next section, I want to make a concession here. This dead information stuff, this applies a lot more to intermediate and advanced learners because beginners, if you're learning a word as a beginner, it's probably going to be a word that you're going to keep seeing continuously. These are like high frequency words. So if you're going to keep seeing the word anyway, this dead information stuff really doesn't apply. There's a moment in Evildea's video where he opens up his flashcard app and he shows all of like his decks and things like that. And in my opinion, this is what made me more anti-flashcard than where I started. Because what I saw on the screen was like at least tens of hours of work, maybe like 20 or 30 hours of work. I don't know, probably more.
I don't know how much work, but it's nowhere near that. Like, I'll spend maybe 10 minutes a day creating new flashcards. Usually they practice 1 or 2 structures. And then I'll do like 30 minutes to 40 minutes of reviews, depending. And that might sound like a lot, but I actually consider that time that is better spent than trying. Like, I see 40 minutes of Anki is equal to like 3 hours of just pure input. Like, that's how I see it. This is based on my experience doing Dreaming Spanish, the Dreaming Spanish series I've got. And also my experience learning Esperanto, my experience learning Mandarin Chinese. So that is a judgment that I have deemed to be worthy. And also as a programmer, this type of stuff doesn't bother me at all.
No idea. According to Evildea, to make flashcards actually do their job, you need audio cards, sentence cards, multiple cards per word covering different patterns, different decks for listening, producing, and reading.
Okay, you don't need this. Maybe I should have cleared this up in my video. But I showed you guys all the different ones because Chinese is a beast of a language, okay? Most people don't understand how much more difficult Chinese is to Spanish. The audio cards are to help in my mind, the audio cards are to help you to basically understand information-dense words. So when you hear a word, like you guys have all had this experience where you'll hear a number and like the number just goes over your top. You're like, yeah, I know it was a number, but like I don't know what the number was, because it's just so information dense. Audio cards are great for that. Training your brain to break down those really information dense sounds and just getting that lightning fast. Now, there are programs and games that allow you to do that as well, but there's also other information dense words. And I think I gave an example of meiga joey, which is like every second Monday. Okay, so you got meiga. Did I pronounce that right? Meiga yiga joey. I think I pronounced that wrong. So meiga is like at a gap of yiga, one, joey, Monday. So if you hear that in conversation, it's so information dense, your brain just got to go, I don't know what that was. And that's where audio cards come in. So if you don't have that problem, then you don't need audio cards. The second one, sentence cards, that was for production practice. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you know all the words, you know all the grammar, yet you're unable to produce a sentence like with flow? That's where sentence cards come in handy. That's why I could say straight up in this video, 现在在这个视频里我们讨论这个话题. That's why I can say at this moment in this video, we are discussing this topic. It's because I practice production, okay? Now, I am not that fluent with all of Chinese. You might have heard that one, fucking hell, Evildea, your Chinese is fluent. I'm not. I'm fluent with very select portions of Chinese because I practice those. And with time, I'll get better with the whole language. As I say, I'm around a B1 level. You need multiple cards per word. You don't need, but I've found my brain is very smart in the fact that it's able to pick up, like I'm able to see the shape of a sentence and just know the outcome. So I kind of trick it and teach it that, you know, having multiple flashcards, there's actually a pattern I want it to understand here. You don't need to do that, but you can. You need listening, production, reading. Reading decks is not going to be needed for pretty much any language except for a language like fucking Chinese, okay? It's like Spanish, you don't need it. Esperanto, you don't need it. English, you don't need it. You just practice reading, you'll get there. Like, it's not like there's fucking tens of thousands of different characters. That's what a reading deck is for. But yeah, like, this was more a case of me taking on essentially one of the hardest languages in the world and how I deal with different parts of that.
You have to build templates, generate audio, organize decks, all before you can actually use flashcards to learn a language in the first place. So this brings me to the last reason I'm anti-flashcard, and it's probably the most practical reason for anybody who's just getting into language learning, and that's a concept from economics called opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the value of whatever you didn't do because you chose to do something else.
So the way I see this, and I understand what you're going to say, is basically, oh, you got to spend all this time doing this and you consider it wasted time. I actually see this as a investment in time that pays off later down the road. If we were to look at this as in business perspective, since that's the route we're going to go right now, you always see this in companies. What can we do right now to make some form of progress? Let's do that. However, there was a second route they could have taken. They could have invested some time to build out the systems that they needed and then progressed faster. Okay, so basically we can start progressing right now and make some progress, or we build out the systems and then we make rapid progress. So that's what I see Anki as. Yes, it takes time. You need to learn it, but it is an investment that is worth it in the long run. It actually beats out most other things. That's how I see it.
Spend an hour prepping flashcards. The opportunity cost is whatever you didn't do because you spent that hour creating flashcards. Every hour we spend prepping for a day of study is just an hour we could have spent actually learning the language. Throughout his video, Evildea repeatedly says that doing flashcards wrong is a real problem. Not drilling variable structures is bad. Not having audio cards is bad. Single word cards are bad. Matching pairs are bad. That implies there's a legitimate skill floor. Before flashcards can even start helping you, you first
That is correct. You do need to learn how to use flashcards. I agree with you.
You have to understand the science of flashcards. And then you have to invest real time figuring out what you think you need to study. And
it becomes very easy once you do understand it, though. Basically, you put in there the structures, like if this was a production deck, you put in there the structures you realize you struggle with. That's it.
Then finally, after you have the science and figuring out what you need, then you have to actually create the flashcards. So you have to know enough about the language to know what you need to know. Then you need to design a system for yourself. Then you need to build that system. And finally, you can actually use the flashcards. To me, that sounds like a huge time investment, especially if you're just getting in.
Up front, it's a couple of hours of watching Anki videos at the beginning, maybe like max a couple of hours. Like realistically, you get like someone who has some level of tech savviness, they'll figure it out pretty quickly. Within an hour, you know what to do. And if you watch a couple of videos from people who have done it for a while, you kind of get a feel for how you want to do it. And then generating cards doesn't take that long. And yeah, you could spend 40 minutes, whatever, or 30 minutes in Anki doing reviews per day, and you may feel like that's wasted time because you're not doing that with the language. However, if you've done this long enough, like I have, with multiple languages, you realize quite quickly, bro, this helps a lot.
Into a language. It gives you tons of preliminary homework. Input doesn't really have that problem. The skill floor is basically on the ground.
No, actually. I've learned from my Dreaming Spanish series that there is a lot of mistakes you can make with input if you do just a pure input route. The mistakes is a lot of people, like, you'll hear the common one, okay? It must be 98% comprehensible before you start watching, which means that 98% of those nodes and their associated connections you already know, and you're just trying to slot in a little bit here and there, okay? Now, obviously, the skill issue here is, well, you got to find that content. You could watch content for like a couple of minutes and then realize it's too hard or it's too easy. You got to find, as you said, content that's at a level that's actually interesting. There's plenty of ways to screw it up, okay? You may end up watching too much of a certain type of content and getting good at that one thing while lacking in others. Like, you literally just got to look at the comment section to my Dreaming Spanish series and on Reddit, and people will always tell you how I'm doing listening wrong. Like, everyone's got their opinion about how to do it right.
There's no wrong way to listen to something you understand. There's no system to build. There's no decks to maintain. The only thing you really have to figure...
So there's no way to listen to something you understand. Well, there is. You might understand it, but you might not understand it well enough to actually pick up words from it. You might understand 90% of it, and then there's like 10% which all as a conjunction, like together, you don't understand, and therefore you never pick up what's in that 10%, and you're basically just rehashing what you already know.
Your route is finding content at your level. Even if you want to argue there's some skill floor for input, eventually you're going to have to get over that anyway, because eventually you'll need to understand people speaking the language you want to learn. And let's say you're somebody who...
That is true, but again, I see it, and I said in my video that I think the time that you put in the flashcards will speed up any input you do by like 3 times, depending on the types of flashcards you're doing and what you're focused on.
Does want targeted practice. In my opinion, the best way to get targeted practice is just listen to the same video over and over again. Or on my website, Langualytics, you can generate a transcript and just listen to the same sentence over and over again. And that would be way faster than constructing this whole, system of flashcards for you.
Okay, this is going to be a bit of a cheap shot. But bro, you built an entire website for yourself to do this, okay? You built an entire website. That's time invested. You invested time. You invested a lot of time to build a website, probably way more time than I ever did with Anki. Now I can then say, yeah, but you got a business and you're trying to sell stuff to it. And there's probably plenty of other websites that do the same stuff as your website out there. But you can't be sitting here and saying, well, you're wasting a lot of time building Anki cards while I've just built an entire website. Okay, I've had my cheap shot now. I'll move on.
And I did that. I was never an ALG purist. But when I was looking for exercises to do in the beginning of my journey, what I really didn't want to do is construct this gigantic flashcard apparatus. Instead, I wanted to look for exercises that kind of already existed without me having to put in any work. So I did transcription exercises, and I did rewatching videos with English subtitles and Spanish subtitles. That stuff I did. Am I recommend?
Yeah, you can do that, but like there's also people that hate rewatching the same thing over and over. Like, some people can do that perfectly fine. Like, I'm actually one of those. I can do it fine. But I know people who literally cannot watch the same thing twice, otherwise it drives them insane.
Sending it to you, not necessarily, but my point is that I skipped over all of this setup that I would have needed if I got into the world.
But you built a website.
World of flashcards. When Evildea is showing off his flashcard decks and talking about all the complexities and nuances you have to understand, if I was to do that, I would say it like more apologetically, like, hey guys, I know this is a ton of work, but like it's really, really helpful. But
why would I be apologetic about that? If you don't want to do it, just don't do it. Like, why would I be like, I'm sorry guys, I've just created this system that works fucking amazing for me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. If you can't use the system, I'm sorry, you're just low IQ. It's your own fault for being low IQ, You're just limited. I gotta use the correct polyglot terminology. You're just limited.
But he doesn't seem to frame it that way. To me,
why would I frame it that way? If you don't like systems like this, then don't do that. Like, there's other YouTubers that have got like this crazy ass calendar system about how they practice things at certain times and certain hours and stuff like that. Like, I'm not gonna be like, hey, bro, That's complex. You should apologize.
Me, it comes off more like he's selling flashcards as like a polyglot lifestyle choice.
Bro, you came to the one channel who's not selling anything at the moment. I'll probably sell something in the future. But like, I'm not selling anything here. I have literally the entire series where I'm learning Spanish without any flashcards. And I'm showing how that's possible. But my preference is for flashcards. And should I hide my preference? No. And it's not even just a preference. It's just based on my experience learning Esperanto, Mandarin, Chinese, Spanish, that literally it helps you more than just not using it. So if you can use it, use it. If you don't like it, then don't use it. Like, I'm not gonna, it's not like you're gonna join my Discord and say down with the flashcards and the next thing you know, my mods have sent you to the Shadow Realm. Like, you can do whatever you want. I'm just going to give you a realistic insight about what works.
Like, all of this setup is testimony to how well he understands the language he's learning. And I think that attracts people who want to appear more academic, but for someone like me, who just wants to have fun.
Bruh, I've never at any point said, like, I'm the academic type. I am a programmer, and therefore I will design systems that work to my skill set. But, like, I'm not the type of person who's sitting here saying, oh, I'm fucking an academic. You don't see me prefacing my Evildea with Professor Evildea with a doctorate in linguistics or anything like that, because, well, one, I don't have it, and two, even if I did, it'd probably sound pretty cringe. And if you even look at my goddamn YouTube channel, bro, like, look at my description, okay? I'm a game developer, actor, lover of languages. I speak Esperanto C1, English B2. Mandarin Chinese B1+, and Spanish absolute beginner. Like, I could bullshit and, like, up these numbers, you know, up these numbers. Like, I could do that, make myself look better, but I don't. I'm just honest about my experiences.
At a bar with my Argentinian girlfriend, it's not a great commercial for picking up flashcards.
Well, if it didn't sell you on using flashcards, it's your loss. Like, I don't care.
My reflection after watching both videos and reading through both transcripts is...
Wait, so you did watch both videos and you read through both transcripts? That's more than I did. You lied at the start. You lied, bro. You said you hadn't watched either.
I think Steve is much more focused on the meta argument that says the brain learns a language a certain way, and therefore our methods should conform to the way our brain learns languages. I think Evildea kind of tries to square flashcards with the network of experiences model, but I got the impression he wasn't super interested in that meta discussion.
I don't care about how people think things work. I care about the outcome. What actually happens once you do the thing. And then I do a comparison, a cross comparison. Okay, was this efficient compared to this? Now, we can sit here and have a semantics battle or a battle about how graphs work, okay? You know, behind the scenes, and what is a node and what is a connection and what can be classified as multiple nodes and what is not, and whether something is in a category or not. Like, we can do that, but it's pointless at the end of the day. At the end of the day, the important thing is, does it work? And it does. Like, I've shown time and time again that it works.
More practical case. He makes pragmatic arguments as to why flashcards can help you, but
Exactly.
those arguments don't necessarily contradict anything Steve said by my reading. Flashcards could
And I wasn't contradicting him so much. I was, because he was showing flashcards used on his service, and they were one-to-one word translations, and I was like, that's a bad way of doing it, don't do that. In fact, that's probably not the recommended way to use flashcards. So I was contradicting him in that, because he was presenting as if that is the recommended way. Now, I know that's how we all learned flashcards back in school, with the little paper ones, but come on, we've moved beyond that point by now.
target weaknesses in your speaking and understanding. They could be a better active retrieval exercise than input, but still have all the problems Steve lists in his video.
Yes, and that's why I was saying don't do it like that.
Evildea really isn't contradicting Steve in his arguments. Evildea says in his experience, flashcards can get you to fluency 3 times faster, but speed to fluency is only really one dimension of language learning. Let's grant that they can get you to some level of fluency faster. Do they do that at the cost of depth? I'm not
No, not necessarily, because what is depth when it comes to a language? Depth is usually an understanding of the culture and just having more words, basically. Like having more words, more verbs, maybe some more complex structures, proverbs, stuff like that. That is what depth is when you're getting past, like, you know, the B2 level. And that, yeah, you will get via input, but that's not what the purpose of using them is for. The purpose, in my mind, and the way I talk about them on this channel, and I know people talk about them different ways, but the purpose is to prime your brain, to help it either produce or hear certain set structures, and maybe words if those words are being problematic, or proverbs, things like that, information dense stuff. Like, that's what I use it for. It's not to learn a whole language.
Arguing that point here, I'm just showing how Steve and Evildea's arguments aren't mutually exclusive. And now let me give you my very basic grug brain take on flashcards after watching this entire saga unfold. I have a very simple view of language learning. I'm okay with just taking an input to understand the language if I can do that. If I can understand something, I'm going to choose that 100 times over, setting up any rational system to try to improve myself. I don't use flashcards because there's really nothing for me that I'm in dire need of speeding up or improving. I wouldn't argue against flashcards so fervently in the beginner phase because in that phase, you're really just trying to get a grip on the language. But once you have a grip on the language, to me, it's hard to understand why you wouldn't just keep listening and keep speaking. Like, if you guys know me, you know that my...
Okay, I think I've been clear already about the benefits. The listening side of things is to help you with those information dense things. The speaking side is to help you reinforce good habits. Okay, you can just start speaking. There's plenty of people that speak a language fluently, absolutely butcher the language, because like they practiced the same old pattern over and over, and it was a bad practice from the beginning. Okay, you can do that. And then there's people who would just stutter their way through everything. You can do that if you want, okay? But that's what I see the production deck as being useful for. And the reading deck is really only appropriate to languages like, fucking Chinese or maybe Japanese, something like that. Like, it's not one you're going to use for any other language. So it's very context dependent in this video, or in my previous video.
The solution to everything in life is just to do a thing better, do that thing. I know this video is kind of technical, but at the end of the day, I just have a pretty simple reason I don't do flashcards. I grant that if I had to take a CEFR exam tomorrow and I got killed if I didn't get at least C1, then flashcards would make a lot more sense. But currently, that's not my situation. Fine.
I'm not sure what you're trying to say there. Are you saying you're not a C1? I don't know.
Finally, I run a comprehensible input website called Langualytics where you can find user-sourced comprehensible input at your level in whatever language you're trying to learn. I don't have Esperanto. I am sorry, Evildea. It's free.
If you had Esperanto, bro, half your content would be my content.
You don't have to sign up to look around. The link is always in the description, and I will see you guys in the next...
Okay, so that's his video. That's his channel. You can go sub to him. I am still not sure what was happening here. So you were explaining that me and Steve are not contradicting each other. And I agree in many ways we weren't. But I was pointing out in my video that Steve was misrepresenting how to use flashcards and the benefits to flashcards. And then I think you were trying to say that I was showing that... I'm still not quite sure, because I know you're talking about context and stuff. And you're basically saying, oh, well, it's still at the end of the day, you're still putting things into a folder. You still got set amounts. And I'm like, I don't disagree with that. But the context side of things, that's what I do disagree with, because one, you can add context to flashcards. And two, if you're creating the flashcards yourself, it usually comes from some type of real life context. Like, you've had a need for that. So that's what I'm not too sure is going on in this video. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I'll see you all in the next video. And if you're not there, I will be practicing flashcards, in which I tell you all the ways I'm going to violently assault you.